Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial video. In this video I'm going to be showing you my drawing of a great white shark, and in this example I'm using a mechanical pencil with HB leads on smooth Bristol board paper. I'm also using a blending stick to help with the shading, and a small eraser to add some highlights later on in the drawing. But don't worry too much about the equipment you're using. As long as you have a pencil and paper in front of you, you'll be able to recreate something like this. To begin this drawing, I started off by sketching the outlines and just getting the basic shape of the shark. So I started off by sketching the shark's head. The mouth runs kind of parallel to the top of the shark's head, and it has a little curve at the end. The nose is actually quite squared off, with almost a 90-degree angle at the tip. And the shark's eye is quite far forward. It's kind of level with the tip of the shark's nose. I continued sketching just to get the basic shape of the entire shark's body, and just making sure to try and fit it onto the page. So the back of the shark levels off, and then it's time to sketch the first dorsal fin. Going along with the references I had in front of me, I made sure to add some damage to the right side of the fin. After that, the rest of the shark's back slopes downwards towards the tail, and I also at this point decided to draw the shark's belly, which kind of curves downwards and goes parallel with the shark's back until it reaches a kind of a level with the dorsal fin, and then it slopes upwards towards the tail as well. A shark's tail fin is extremely large, and in this example the top of the fin almost reaches the level of the dorsal fin. After that, it was time to add the other fins, so that would be the pectoral fins on the side of the shark's body. I made sure to have these fins angled, as I wanted the drawing to be an angled view of the shark to make it more interesting. If it was just an exact side view of the shark, then it wouldn't seem as realistic. Having that kind of angled view is a nice way to bring a bit more realism and a natural view to your drawing. Alongside the pectoral fin on the side that's facing us, I made sure to add the 5 gills in front of that as well. And lastly, I added the extra fins going along the bottom of the shark, and the second dorsal fin going along the top of the shark's back just before the tail. Once that was done, it was time to work on the shading, and in this drawing I started off by shading the shark's head, starting off with the most detailed area to begin with. I started by adding a basic layer of shading, adding some extra shading to the underside of the nose and along the top edge above the eye. And once that shading was placed down, that's when I used the blending stick to help smooth the shading, trying to make it seem as smooth as the shark's skin. I added some extra shading in front of the shark's nostril and some ridges of shading going around the outside of the eye. To add any highlights where I needed them, I used the small eraser, so I used this to add a ridge of highlighting going above the eye and around the lower edge of the eye. And in the places where I wanted to add some extra shading, I added the shading first and then used the blending stick over the top of that just to blend it in and to not make the shading seem so harsh. There's an area of lighter skin that goes along the bottom of the shark, and it starts right at the bottom of the nose. So for that area I just used the blending stick to just smooth out a little bit of shading and left the top part of that area nice and light so it would contrast with the darker skin above. I also added a little bit of shading with the pencil to that area just to help the contrast and show the different textures between the areas of the darker and the lighter toned skin. For the shading of the inside of the shark's mouth, I made sure to leave the outlines of the different levels of teeth, and I added the darkest shading at the top of the mouth, and then blended it downwards. I added a medium level of shading to the teeth on the inner edges of the mouth, and left the highlighted areas to the teeth on the outside. Looking at the references in front of me, the teeth always seem to be pointing in lots of different directions, so I made sure to have some really pointing directly out of the mouth and at all different angles. I continued this style of shading going along the shark's body, with that ridge of shading going from the top of the shark's eye and moving along the side of the shark, with a lighter area of shading along the top, also following along with the same area of lighter skin going along the bottom half of the shark. I continued the shading and moved on to adding the shading to the dorsal fin, making sure to leave a highlighted ridge along the top edge of the fin, and adding the darkest shading toward the right side. I also wanted to try and show up the damaged areas along that right side by using some dark outlines, just showing the wear and tear that you'd expect on a great white shark. After that I moved on to the pectoral fins on the side of the shark, starting off with the one on the far side, adding a medium level of shading then using the blending stick to add some smoothness to that, and then adding the darker toned skin to the tip of the fin. And then it was time to add the shading to the fin closest to us, but I started off by adding the details to the gills in front of that. A great way of making these areas stand out and seem more realistic is to make use of contrast. So I started off by adding some really dark shading to the inside of the gills, and then I used the small eraser to add a highlight going along the left side of each gill. This really helps to make this area seem like it's protruding from the surface, and it really helps to add to that 3D effect. And for the shading of the fin, I added a medium level of shading and then used the small eraser to add some highlights going along the edge closest to us, and I added a very dark edge going along the bottom of that. Moving along the shark's body, I continued the same shading process, with that ridge of shading going from the shark's eye and moving all the way down, and having the lighter shading going along the top of the shark. Also making sure to continue the lighter area of skin going along the shark's belly. Then it was time to work on the shading going towards the shark's tail, adding shading to those two fins on the bottom of the shark, adding the darkest shading to the fin closest to us, with the darker skin on top, and then adding some lighter mid-toned shading to the fin on the far side, with that being the lighter skin. I made sure to add some darker shading to the second dorsal fin, going along with the same tone as the first dorsal fin that we shaded earlier on. At this point in the drawing, it's time to add a ridge that starts kind of from the level of the dorsal fin and then moves downwards towards the shark's tail. The best method to show this in the drawing is the same method that I used for the gills, by starting off by adding the darkest shading to the shaded side of the ridge, and then using the small eraser to add an area of highlight going along the top edge. Having a sharp contrast between the shaded area and the highlighted area is an amazing way of making that ridge seem like it's protruding from the surface. After that, I quickly added a medium shading to the fin on the bottom below the second dorsal fin, and then it was time to add the details to the shark's tail fin. On the tail fin, I made sure to have a ridge of highlighting going from the tip of the tail all the way down towards the shark's body, and I did this for the top half of the fin and the bottom half. Having those highlighted ridges and having some darker shading going along the side of them really helps to define the shape of the tail, and it really helps to show up the thicker and the thinner areas. After that was done, you could say that the drawing was completed, but in this example I wanted to add a little bit of light shading in the background, so I used the pencil to begin with and then used a large blending stick to smooth that shading into the background. After that, I used the small eraser to add some highlighted lines going diagonally down. In this example, I'm trying to recreate the light rays that you'd see moving through the water. And to add a final touch, I used the eraser to add a highlight going along the top edge of the shark, and I used it to create the effect of the light rays kind of bouncing off the shark's skin, just along the top half of the shark and on the dorsal fin. After that, my drawing was completed, and I really hope this video helped in some way, and if you do work on anything similar, or if you followed this video along, then feel free to show me your work on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. If you enjoy videos like this, then make sure to subscribe, and any likes, shares, that kind of support is hugely appreciated. It really means a lot and it helps to support the channel. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and follow along with the progress photos throughout the week, then be sure to check out the links in the description box below. And once again, thank you so much for the support on this channel. I really hope this video helped out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.